All right, everyone. So, in this module, I've taught you guys a couple of ways of interacting with the world. That includes teleportation, ray interactor. We also did direct interactor and gaze interactor last module. I'm going to teach you guys another one, which is you can use a hand in you can use grab, and this is called a grab input or a grab interactor. And the idea is instead of walking like by pressing a button here, or even like physically walking, like imagine you could like pull yourself, like in Photoshop where like you might use like the hand tool to pull around a document or something like that. It's a bit like that. Okay. So we're gonna try this out. So I already have this scene here. It's a pretty basic scene, and we're I set up this X rig at one end, and there's kind of I just put this here so you could tell the difference between one end and the other. And there's sort of this red obelisk here. And I've already set up it's got a basic rig. It's got a character controller. There's a camera with a post track driver and all that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to we're going to add in the grab move provider. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a child here, and I'm just going to call this right controller. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to add the way we did the ray interactor and the direct interactor, which is I'm going to come in here and let's add in the tracked pose driver. And I'm going to set this to reference, and I'm going to set this to input for the right controller, the rotation for the right controller, and the tracking state. Okay. So we've done this before when we set up like array interactor or direct interactor. And let's do tracking state. All right. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to, we want to use, so normally usually I have like a little component called locomotion, and that's typically where I put things like the gaze interactor or, the direct, but here I'm actually going to apply the hand or the grab interactor here. And I'm going to say grab, and we're going to use what's called the grab move provider. Okay, and what this means is that I can now use this item, the controller, to grab the scene and pull it. Okay, so the main thing that we have to do is say what's causing the locomotion. That would be the locomotion mediator, which is attached to this locomotion object in my hierarchy here. This is the directions that you can go. So I could move in the X direction, which would be this way. The Y direction, which would be up and down, which is currently turned off, which means we're not going to go in the Y direction. We're going to do a little scene later where we do that. We can actually like go upward. Enable Z direction. So that means we'd go this way or this way. The major thing that needs to know is what's controlling, like where are we moving from? And we actually want to use the controller for that. So I'm actually going to drag in this controller for the controller transform. And then we basically have to say, how are we gonna, what button corresponds to the moving, the grabbing? And I'm going to click here. I'm going to set this to grab, and we're going to use where it says XRI right locomotion grab move. I'm going to do that. And I'll just repeat it for this one too. Right locomotion grab move. Okay. And that's kind of it. What I've done now is, if I were to run this by using the trigger, which is the grab, I could basically pull and move the world forward or backwards, left or right. Okay. I'm going to show you guys an example in a second. I want to set up another controller. And actually, before I do that, at the moment, you would be able to use the controller, but it's kind of hard to tell where everything is. So actually, what I'm going to do is add a little, instead of using, in the past, we've had like the sort of hand models. What I'm going to do is just add an object here, like a sphere. Okay. And I'm going to put the sphere on the controller. And so the sphere is kind of like, it's like a little ball. It just kind of represents where my controller is. And I'm just going to set this to 0, 0, 0. So it's right up against the controller. I'm just going to make it red. Oops, did I do that? Let's drag it over here. There we go. And I'm just going to make it smaller. Okay. So this is going to be like sort of like the hand, if you will. Okay. So if I were to save and build this, if I were to do this, I'd be able to see a little ball, click and move around. I want to build one for the left controller. So what I'm actually just going to do is duplicate this and call this left controller. The main thing is just making sure that the pose track driver is set to the correct controller. So I got to change this to the left controller for the move position and tracking. And the same thing for the grab move. I'd want to set it to the left controller grab move button, which is basically the trigger. So I'm going to come in here and let's do position left, XR left position, rotation, left rotation, and then tracking state, left tracking state. And I'm going to do the same thing for here. If I were to use grab, I'm going to use XRI left locomotion grab, and the same for this. Okay. And that should work. So, what I did here was, if I were to save, and you'll see this in the video, I can kind of claw my way, kind of like grab it, kind of like using the hand tool, like in Illustrator or Photoshop or something like that, where I can kind of move the world around. One thing that you may want to be aware of is, see where it says move factor? The move is how much you move per grab, so to speak. So if you feel like you're going too slow, you may want to increase the move factor. So this is how far you move in your grab. So right now it's defaulting to 1. Maybe I would set it to like 3 or 5 or something like that. Okay, so try that out.
All right, everyone, this is exercise 1. So I set up these kind of little ball hands, and it's set up to move, grab, move, which basically means I'm going to move these and grab with the trigger, and I can pull myself closer. So you can see how we're getting closer to this giant obelisk that I created, right? All right. So, and I'm going to do it. So I was going one item at a time. So this is kind of equivalent to like the hand tool, like in Photoshop, So, it's just a different way of moving. I'll do another video where I make the amount you move much bigger, or you can also even set it up that it requires both hands at the same time to move. So you can think about maybe if you were doing like a boat, or I don't know. I could think of instances where maybe like you're climbing a rope or something like that, where maybe it's like you want it to be more of a hand movement, or maybe it's like a bicycle, or I don't know. I'm trying to think of like maybe there's like a device like a scooter where like your hand affects the moving forward or something. So that's kind of what this can do for you. Okay. All right. This is exercise. This is exercise 1 again. I did the same thing again. I just made how much you go further. So now when I pull, you can see I'm going a lot further than before. So you can, really play around with this. It's kind of like that movie minority report where you just kind of move stuff around. All right. Just to show you can change the amount, which will change the input there. Okay.
One last thing I wanted to talk about with it comes to using the move provider, the grab move provider. So at the moment, I can move each one of the controllers to either, to move my item. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, I wanted to set it up that both controllers had to be used in order to create the movement. There's a way we could actually do that. So what I'm going to do, you can see here I have the left and right controller. And what I'm actually going to do is, with each of them, I'm going to set the move provider to 0 for both the left and the right one. Okay. And the reason for that is I don't want to be able to move just by using an individual controller. And then either for the left or for the right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and there's something called a two-handed grab move provider. Okay. If I click on that, I'm just going to close some of these up. Basically, what this means is that now, rather than moving with one hand, we can move by using two. Okay. So once again, you got to say the locomotion, what's causing the locomotion, what directions can we go, and then it needs to know what are the two move providers. So we actually already have this. I have my right one and then the left one. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the option that says require two hands for translation. What that essentially means is both hands have to be clicked at the same time in order to move. And so essentially it's kind of like rowing, where it's like, when you row, you use two hands together to move the oar. It's going to be kind of like that. So I'm going to be using two hands, and that's going to allow me to move forward. And this is the move factor. So I'm moving by 1. Remember that I set these individuals to 0 so that basically individual hands can't move, but I can move with two hands. Okay. And so maybe instead of 1, it moves by 2, because, and then now if I were to save and do it, it requires that both hands be put into trigger mode in order to work. Okay.
All right, everyone. So in this scene, what I've done is I've set this up to be a two-handed grab. So if I just use one hand, you'll notice that I'm not moving forward. But now what I'm going to do is to use both. And when I do that, I'm moving forward. All right. So it's kind of like, you can also kind of use one and kind of grab and kind of pull. But all right. So you can kind of see it's basically kind of like I'm rowing a boat. I'm sort of grabbing both and pulling, grabbing both and pulling, grabbing both and pulling. Okay. So that just gives you an idea what a two-handed grab would do for you. Okay.